Whew. Hello. Right, we need to get everyone back. This is not going well. Okay. Okay. Third time's a charm. I've just kicked the internet router. I'm hoping that's fixed it. We will start again from question 1. Sorry for the delayed kickoff. Hashtag back stronger, Ben Mile. Thank you. Bring back the half and half scarf for good luck. Well, possibly. It could be the reason. The shirt hasn't fallen down yet. The internet has. Right, let's get some bodies back in. The Lavenders are back in again. Sorry to make you follow me around the internet this evening, everybody, but hopefully we are back for good, in the words of Take That. I haven't, unfortunately, got a wide connection because of where my router is in my flat, and I'd need a wire of about 20 meters. And yeah, or I could just do it in a very dark space. Team Jeremy Beagle is in the house. Good evening. Right, the numbers are creeping back up. Hi, Paul. Hi, Teresa. Loud and clear this time. Tom Hancock has said that Gaz is hosting the QPR quiz on the QPR channel this evening, dressed as Gene Simmons. Well, I've come as Paul Tisdale wearing a Wycombe Wanderers training top. That's my effort this evening. Right, numbers are definitely coming back up now. Good to see you all coming back. I appreciate your patience this evening. Yeah. Okay. We will get going soon, and we'll rattle through these questions as well this evening. Julian Brown he's came across this by accident, so I hope you're not a Plymouth fan, Julian. Right. Jimmy Somerville, that's a good shout, Dale Herman. And Keith Scott beat you to that one a few years ago. I used to call Keith Scott Bobby Davro, and then in retaliation, Keith Scott called me Jimmy Somerville, which is fair enough, really. Julian Brown, Watford. Well, Watford, there we are. We don't mind Watford. Dave Bassett's found us again. Dave, we nearly shook you off, but you've stuck onto us. Well done. Okay, numbers are coming back in now. We'll get going again in a couple of minutes. Apologies for this, guy. While we get the numbers up, I'll just give you a little bit of an insight into my sad life. This is my stats book, which has my name on. This is what I do on my commentary notes in for every commentary for 3 counties and an I follow. Loads of stats, loads of team lineups, tables, goals, lists of goal scorers, assists, cards, referees. It's all in the black book. There's 2 seasons worth in there, and it's been used tonight for tonight's quiz. Right, numbers are flooding back up now. Well done, everybody. I think you should all get an extra point. Actually, you all start with 1 point this evening for still being here. So give yourself an extra point. The quiz this evening is out of the first 20 questions is out of 36. And the second 20 is out of 28. We'll do an out of 40 mark later when I've worked it out. Right. Are we ready, everybody? Can you see and hear me loud and clear? Indeed, Derek Adams will not be pleased at how late this quiz is going to finish. Yes, right. Thank you, everybody. Right. Belatedly, let's get cracking. Question number 1. Today would have been Wycombe's last home game of the season. Who would they have played this afternoon at Adams Park? In the regular season. Today would have been Wycombe's last home game of the season. Who would have the opponents been? And just to think what might have happened this afternoon. Could have been a win to guarantee automatic promotion or secure a playoff place. We'll just never know. Or maybe we will, but later in the summer. I don't know the answer to that, what's going to happen between now and the end of the season. So question number 1. Today would have been Wycombe's last home game of the season. Who would they have played against? For 1 point. No putting the answers in the comment section, please. Question number 2. Which player scored the first goal in the Football League era for Wycombe Wanderers? Who scored the first goal in the Football League for Wycombe Wanderers? That's question number 2 for 1 point. Which player scored the first goal in the Football League for Wycombe Wanderers? Long time ago. Many of you would have been at that game, I'd imagine. Some of you probably might not have been born. But it's in the record books. Who scored the first goal in the Football League for Wycombe Wanderers? It's okay, LJ Leighton. You did put the answer up to the first question, but you realise the error of your ways, and we forgive you. Just write them down on a pen and paper and keep your own score. It's an honesty quiz this evening. There's no prizes. And we'll mark the first 20 at the end of the first half. Okay, question number 3. Wycombe Wanderers have a 100% record in the league over Manchester City. Played 2, won 2, pretty good. These games happened in the 98-99 season, with Wycombe winning 1-0 at Adams Park and 2-1 at Main Road. So Wycombe scored 3 goals that season against Manchester City. But who scored them? You get 1 point for each goal scorer. Who scored the Wycombe goals against Manchester City in the league when we beat them twice in 98-99? Louise Brown, you are correct. His knowledge is our prize. Indeed. Even if you don't know the answers, you will learn the correct answers to these questions. So you're learning something even if you're not getting the questions right this evening. Morgan, the first question was, who would Wycombe have played today at Adams Park? It would have been the final game of the home game of the season. Who would the Wycombe's opponents been? Yeah, just put the messages up. If you're joining us late, I appreciate it's been difficult finding me tonight on a reliable internet connection. And question 2 was, well, Dale, listen to the wording of the question. Which player scored the first goal in the Football League for Wycombe Wanderers? That's all I'm going to say. Which player? Chris Waldron is already braced for controversy to the answer to question 2. Well, there we are. Question 3. Wycombe scored 3 goals in season 98-99 in the 2 games against Manchester City. Wycombe won them both 1-0 and then 2-1. But who scored the Wycombe goals that season? I need the 3 goal scorers, 1 point for each. Question 4. There have been 5 Wycombe Wanderers managers who have gone on to manage in the Premier League after their spell at Adams Park. Can you name them? 1 point for each. 5 managers have managed in the Premier League after learning the ropes at Wycombe Wanderers. Who are they? There are 5. I want to know their names. You get 1 point for each. Looking at this list, it's an impressive list. 5 managers who were at Wycombe at one point in their career, went onwards and managed in the Premier League after their spell at Wycombe Wanderers. Not directly after, perhaps in every case, but 5 have managed in the Premier League after having Wycombe on their CV. Who are they? I want the names of the 5. You get a point for each. Right. Question 5. Whilst manager of Swindon Town in 1993, John Gorman, who hadn't managed Wycombe at that point, signed 2 players with strong Wycombe connections. Who were they? 1 point for each. Swindon Town, 1993, managed by John Gorman. He signed 2 players that season. They were in the Premier League, Swindon Town, at that point. He signed 2 players that season with very strong connections to Wycombe Wanderers. I want to know the names of those two players that he signed in 1993. You get 1 point for each. John Gorman, assistant to Glenn Hoddle as England manager at some point in his career as well, was managing Swindon Town. Tom, including caretakers, no. That's to question 4. I think that question was for. Neil Higginbotham reckons he's going to get at least a point after question 4, which is good. Jonathan Evans is struggling tonight. Sorry, Jonathan. There's a long way to go yet, so don't worry. Question number 6. Who is the youngest ever Football League player for Wycombe Wanderers? Who is the youngest ever player to play for Wycombe Wanderers in the Football League? So I'm looking for 93 onwards. Who is the youngest player to play for Wycombe Wanderers in the Football League era? Paul McLeod is finding it easy so far. Well, good for you, Paul. Jonathan as well thinks he's got all of the answers so far. I did listen to the feedback from the last one. It wasn't just the scarf I took notice of. A lot of people did say it was a very difficult quiz last time. It was. And, well, they're only easy if you know the answers, I suppose. Question 6. Who's the youngest ever Football League player for Wycombe Wanderers? And no extra points if you tell me his age. Question number 7. And then who is the oldest player to play for Wycombe Wanderers in the Football League? Who's the oldest player to play for Wycombe since they got into the Football League in 1993? Now, we should really all get this if we were playing along to the first quiz 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I can't believe it. It seems like ages ago already, doesn't it? I hope everyone's finding the time isn't dragging too much under lockdown. Obviously, we're all missing the football, but the Chairboys Live initiative started by Matt Cecil and the club, obviously on a much better internet connection than me, is a great thing. It was good to take part in one this week. And also David Stockdale. Wow, what a character. Who knew? They say all goalkeepers are crazy, and he certainly is. No, oldest player to just play for Wycombe Wanderers. So it could have been the debut. It might have just been that they were old. And so, yeah, I don't want to give it away too much. Question number 8. Another goalkeeping question here. Goalkeeper Alex Lynch made 8 appearances for Wycombe, but how many of them were live televised games? 8 appearances for Alex Lynch for Wycombe Wanderers, the young goalkeeper, but how many of them were on live television? Just 8 games, but how many were on live TV? I don't want to know which games, but I want to know the number of games out of his 8 appearances that were on live TV. Julian Brown wants to know if there's any Watford questions. There may be a Watfordish question later, Julian, if you want to stick around. But other than that, it could be a bit of a Wycombe Wanderers education session. So, question number 8. Goalkeeper Alex Lynch made 8 appearances for Wycombe, But how many were live televised games? Question number 9. This week, the Football Manager Cup kicked off with Wycombe drawn away at Crewe Alexandra. Craig Anderson, the Wycombe fan, is the manager, but what was the final score in the match? The Football Manager Cup was, it's the game, computer game Football Manager. They've arranged a knockout competition between loads of clubs. Wycombe are in it, of course. The first round was this week. How did Wycombe get on against Crewe Alexandra? Drawn away at Virtual Gresty Road. How did they do? Big Jim says his first bottle of beer must have had a hole in it. Thanks to everyone for tweeting their pictures. Right. Craig Anderson is in tonight. He says he might know the answer to that one. I hope you do, Craig. Question number 9. This week, the Football Manager Cup kicked off with Wycombe drawn away at Crewe Alexandra. Craig Anderson is the manager for Wycombe on Football Manager. But what was the final score in the match? It's a computer game, Football Manager. Some of you may be aware of it. But the people behind Football Manager have set up an excellent initiative, getting fans of each club to play against each other in a knockout tournament. Wycombe were drawn away at Crewe. What was the score? The game was this week. I want to know the score for 1 point. Question number 10. Related to this, who was the last Wycombe manager to win their first competitive game in charge for Wycombe Wanderers? So I'm looking for the manager whose first game in charge was a victory. Who was that manager? Gareth Brock is playing Football Manager whilst doing this quiz. Multitasking. I've not played Football Manager for about 20 years. Looking at, I watched the game this week that Craig played in. It was played on Twitch on a very dodgy internet connection. I watched that one as well from the office. It looked very, very complicated. This does not include caretaker managers, this last question. Who was the last Wycombe manager to win their first competitive game in charge? I'm looking for the first permanent Wycombe manager. In other words, I'm not sure if we've had a caretaker manager win a game since. No, I don't think we have. Anyway, we'll go for permanent just to make it crystal clear. Who was the last Wycombe manager, permanent Wycombe manager, to win their first competitive game in charge? When was the last time that happened? Right, the next 10 questions are all based on this season. So how good is your short-term memory? Question 11 for 1 point. Wycombe were unbeaten in the league until their 8th game. Who did they lose to and what was the score? So I want the opponent and the score, and that's just for 1 point. Wycombe were unbeaten in the league until their 8th game in the league. Who did they lose to and what was the score? I remember it well. Some of you may do as well. Chris Waldron says this is where his quiz falls apart. Short-term memory. It does seem like a long time ago when the season kicked off. Wycombe were unbeaten in the league until their 8th game. Who did they lose to and what was the score? Question 12. Wycombe lost in the first round of the League Cup in August. Happens pretty much every year. Who did they play and what was the score after 90 minutes? Who were Wycombe's opponents in the first round of the League Cup this season and what was the score after 90 minutes? James Ray says, this is where a 9-year-old Stato comes in useful. Yeah. Dale Herman has a sinking feeling. So does Noel Ashford. Paul McLeod, not putting an answer up, but maybe a clue by saying there's a decent pub in the location. We will recap questions 1 to 3 at the end of the first half, because I know some of you were struggling with my slightly nomadic start to this quiz on the internet, and you found me eventually. We will recap questions 1 to 3 at the end of this first half. So, question 12, Wycombe lost in the first round of the League Cup in August. Who did they play and what was the score after 90 minutes? For 1 point, I want to know the name of the opponent and the score after the end of the 90 minutes. Question 13. In the much maligned EFL trophy, the leasing.com trophy, as it's also known, Wycombe failed to progress out of the group stage. They played 3 games. Who were they against? And what was the score in each of the games? 1 point each. And what I mean is 1 point for the team and the result. You have to get the team and the result correct to get 1 point. There's 3 points available here because there were 3 games. So in the EFL trophy, Wycombe failed to progress out of the group stage. They played 3 games. Who were they against? And what was the score in each? The opponent and the correct. Cheers, Dale Jenkins. He's replied to Billy the Swan with the questions 1 to 3 as well. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate your help in testing conditions here on the internet. Oh, it's almost like being back at the commentary point at Adams Park with a dodgy ISDN box. Question 13. In the EFL trophy, Wycombe didn't get out the group stage. They played 3 games. Who were they against? And what was the score in each game? I need the opponent and the score together. 3 points available for that question. Question 14. Right. This season, the club launched the Me and My Wycombe series on the club website, which shines the spotlight on Chairboys fans. It kicked off with Jake and Stanley Lavender. Remember those guys? They're like the mini Anton Deck of Wycombe Wanderers. Great characters. 2 young brothers. They were both given on the video 3 words to sum up Wycombe. What did they say? So I'm looking for 6 words here. 3 from Jake and 3 from Stanley. You get 1 point for each word. They were given 3 words to sum up Wycombe Wanderers. Tough question this if you hadn't seen it, but you can have an educated guess. Worth checking out on the Wycombe website if you've not seen this feature. Me and My Wycombe. Jake and Stanley Lavender. 3 words each to describe Wycombe Wanderers. What were they? There's 6 words here. You get a point for each word you get correct. So if you don't know, it's worth having a punt here. How did they describe Wycombe Wanderers? How did they sum up Wycombe Wanderers in 3 words? Get yourself into the minds of Jake and Stanley. What did they say? Question 15. Ed says, can Jake and Stanley remember? Well, we'll find out. They're playing along. In fact, Amy Lavender says, we know this one. Well, good. Question 15. If the season was decided by points per game, it's been mentioned this week. I'm not saying it is going to be like this, but it has been mentioned. Wycombe would finish 3rd. Who would be the 2 promoted teams automatically in 1st and 2nd place? I need them in the right order. So who would be 1st and who would be 2nd on points per game in League One if it was decided that way as of now, basically? So it would be done from the end of the suspension. Wycombe would be 3rd on points per game, but who would be 1st and who would be 2nd? You get a point for each. A point for each. Points per game. I mean, let me know in the comments. What do you reckon? Is that a fair way of doing it? Are we going to get football again at some point to finish the season? How can it happen? I'm not sure. Rob Kuhig, our chairman, would rather draw a line under this season and start again next season from fresh in League One. But points per game, who would be 1st? Who would be 2nd? Wycombe would be 3rd. And following on from that question then, question 16, which teams under the points per game method would be 4th, 5th and 6th? I need them in the correct order and you get a point for each. Tom Hancock says, rumour has it an 8-team mini tournament might decide it. Not heard that one, but that's an interesting theory. Will Schaefer Peak says he likes the reverse alphabetical order method. I like it. Question 16. Who would be the 4th, 5th and 6th team in League One based on the points per game method that's being talked about at the moment? Wycombe would be 3rd, but who would be 4th, 5th and 6th? Could be pertinent because if there is points per game, but also they go through the playoffs system as well, then that could be pertinent for Wycombe. We don't know at this stage. But what we do know is if it's points per game taken from the suspension, who would be 4th, 5th and 6th in the League One table? That's what I want to know. 1 point for each. Question 17. Which player has the best shots on target percentage this season? So I don't want to know who's had the most shots on target. I want to know who's had the best shots on target percentage this season. Which Wycombe player has the best shots on target percentage this season? So I must underline, I'm not looking for who's had the most shots. Who's got the best shots on target percentage? Justin Williams says, over the course of the season, PPG is fair. Well, some people will agree, some may not. Whatever happens, not everyone's going to be happy. I think we can all agree on that. It's not Beanie, answer to question 17, Jonathan, but which player has the best shots on target percentage this season for Wycombe Wanderers? Question 17. Question 18. Which player has assisted the most this season? Which Wycombe player has the most assists for this season? And I will reveal my sources for this. Question 17 and 18 is according to the stats provided by BBC Sport. So if there's any queries at the end of this quiz, then I will direct you to that website. Question 18. Which player has the most assists this season for Wycombe Wanderers? Question 19. In August, Wycombe beat Southend 4-3 at Adams Park. But how did the sequence of scoring go? For 1 point. I'll give you the first part of the sequence. Southend scored to go 1-0 up. I want to know the rest of the sequence of goals. So which team scored the subsequent goals in the correct order? So in August, Wycombe beat Southend 4-3 in a thriller at Adams Park. But how did the scoring go? Southend opened the scoring, but then who, in the correct order, which team scored the next goals to take us to the 4-3 total? Long way to remember back that one. Dale Jenkins is having great fun reliving that back. Incredible game. Cito Giambati was talking about that game on Chairboys Live yesterday. Tremendous times. Question 20 then. We're at the end of the first half, eventually, after a delayed kickoff, which I again apologise for. And is now a tradition. We finish on a lineup question. What was the Wycombe lineup when they beat MK Dons at Stadium MK in the EFL Trophy? And the eagle-eyed amongst you will realise that may give you a clue to one of the earlier questions in this round. What was the Wycombe lineup when Wycombe beat MK Dons at Stadium MK in the EFL Trophy? I want the starting 11. Adam Cecil has said, ask me who scored that goal in 1993 and I'm all over it. Ask me what happened in a thrilling match this season and I don't have the foggiest. It must be my age. Dale Herman, of course, that pass from Nick Freeman, referring to the Southend Wycombe game at Adams Park. So I need the starting 11 from the EFL Trophy game away at MK Dons. You get 1 point for 7 players, correct, or 2 points for 11. So 7 or more gets you 1 point. If you get all 11, you get 2 points. And if you get the captain as well, you get a bonus point. So there's 3 points available here. 1 point for 7 or more, 2 points for 11 players, and a bonus point if you get the captain. If you get one player right and it's the captain and you say it's the captain, you get 1 point. I'm being generous. Who was the Wycombe lineup when they beat MK Dons at Stadium MK in the EFL Trophy? And a few of you are boycotting this question, which is, of course, your right to do so. I'm not going to ask you why you're boycotting. I mean, there's many reasons why. We could be here all night. I mean, we could be here all night anyway, in all seriousness. Big Jim had went to that game, but he'd been drinking. Dale Herman has decided to name the 1988 Wimbledon FA Cup winning team instead. You can definitely do that if you want, but you won't be getting any points for this quiz. But I understand your view. So that's the end of the first half. Apologies for the late start once again. I hope you're all still with me. Over 100 in the room, which is great. Quick turnaround for the second half. Well, we need to go through the answers. So does anyone need anything repeating from that first half? Pop it in the comment section, and with the number of the question, we'll quickly recap if anyone needs it. If not, we'll crack on with the answers. Give everyone a minute or two to get a drink. And then we'll crack on with the second half. David Robertson says it's his bedtime soon. Well, good night, David. You can watch this back tomorrow if you want. I think it stays up online. Jeremy Spolander is saying he can barely remember what division we're in. Is it Sunday today? Possibly. The Lavenders are doing better this week. I think it helps when you have one of the questions about your own family. No repeats needed. Question 5. Aaron White needs question 5. Whilst manager of Swindon Town in 1993, John Gorman signed 2 players who had strong Wycombe connections. Who were they? You get 1 point for each. Right. Question 17, again for Dan Carr. Which player has the best shots on target percentage this season? Which player has the best shots on target percentage this season? Which Wycombe player? Dale Herman says, I'm loving your indefatigability. I can't even say it, let alone understand what that word is. Can we have a question about Matt Cecil? That needs its own quiz, I think. Tracy says she's got work at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. I've got work tomorrow morning as well. So with that in mind, we should crack on with the answers. Question 19 again for Ed, then we will go through the answers. Right. In August, Wycombe beat Southend 4-3 at Adams Park. But how did the scoring go? Southend went 1-0 up. But who scored? Which team then scored next to take us up to the 4-3? I need the sequence of goals for 1 point. Right, let's go through the answers then. Question 1. Today would have been Wycombe's last home game of the regular season. Who would they have been playing for 1 point? Gillingham. Gillingham for 1 point. The answer to question 1. Question 2, and I might have to put my tin hat on for this. Which player scored the first goal in the Football League for Wycombe Wanderers? It was Chris Curran, who actually played for Carlisle, because Wycombe's first goal in the Football League era was an own goal. I did say it was tricky. It was a difficult one. Chris Curran. Wycombe drew 2-2 at Carlisle in their first ever Football League game back in 1993. Their first Football League goal was an own goal, and it was scored by Chris Curran. So if you've answered Curran or Chris Curran, you get 1 point. And also quite a lot of respect from the Chairboys Massives. Tracy White, Chris Curran. Congratulations. One of you's got it right. Steve Guppy got the Wycombe goal in the 2-2 draw. Chris Curran also scored for Carlisle. So he scored twice that day, one at each end. Right, question 3. Wycombe Wanderers have a 100% record in the league over Manchester City. Played 2-1-2. These games happened in 98-99, with Wycombe winning 1-0 at Adams Park and 2-1 at Main Road. But I wanted to know who scored the Wycombe goals in those games. If you've got Michael Simpson, Sean Devine and Andy Baird, you get a point each for those. If you've got just 1 or 2, then 1 or 2 points. Maximum of 3 points available here. Michael Simpson, Sean Devine and Andy Baird. Guy Lavis says, can we have half a point for own goal? Because of the delayed start, I'm going to say yes, you can have half a point for own goal. Don't say don't give you anything, all right? So Michael Simpson, Sean Devine, Andy Baird is the answer to question 3. 1 point for each. Right on Paul McLeod, all 3. Question 4. There have been 5 Wycombe managers who have gone on to manage in the Premier League after their time at Adams Park. Can you name them? 1 point for each. If you've got Martin O'Neill, John Gregory, Laurie Sanchez, Paul Lambert and Tony Adams, you get a point each. Doesn't matter what order they're in, I just need the names. O'Neill, Gregory, Sanchez, Lambert and Adams went on to manage in the Premier League after managing Wycombe Wanderers. A point for each manager there. Question 4. So, question 5. Whilst manager of Swindon Town in 1993, John Gorman signed 2 players with strong Wycombe connections. Who were they? 1 point for each. Keith Scott and Laurie Sanchez. Laurie Sanchez, who went on to manage Wycombe, of course. And Keith Scott signed from Wycombe into the Premier League. Scored in his debut, I believe, against Liverpool. Keith Scott. Big Jim got 4 out of 5 with the managers. Tom Hancock didn't get Martin O'Neill. Tom, wow. Ty Gooden, no, I don't think he was signed by John Gorman in that season. We might have to have a steward's inquiry on that one. Keith Scott and Laurie Sanchez certainly did sign. So if you've got either Keith Scott or Laurie Sanchez, you will have a point each for those. I don't have Ty Gooden on my answer paper here, but I will double check and let you know. Question 6. Who is the youngest ever Football League player for Wycombe Wanderers? It's Jordan Ibe, of course, who was 15 years and 311 days. Jordan Ibe, 15 years, 311 days. He came on as a 90th minute sub away at Hartlepool. What a place to make your debut. Jordan Ibe, Wycombe's youngest player. And the oldest player for Wycombe in the Football League is of our old friend Barry Richardson, of course, 46. And in doing so, became the 3rd oldest player ever in Football League history, behind Neil McBain for New Brighton, who was 51, a goalkeeper, And Sir Stanley Matthews for Stoke City at the age of 50. Morgan McGee thinks Stephen McMahon may have signed Ty Gooden. Once we finish the answer, if someone could Google it, I would Google it here, but I don't want to knock the internet off again. Don't want to go through that again. Adam Cecil says 100 points for anybody who can explain just how Tony Adams ended up managing in the Premier League. I just don't think anyone can answer that question. So answer to question 7 is Barry Richardson, oldest player. Goalkeeper Alex Lynch. Question 8. Goalkeeper Alex Lynch made 8 appearances for Wycombe, but how many were live televised games? 4. 4 of his games were on live TV. So 50% of his senior appearances for Wycombe Wanderers were on live television. Plymouth away in the playoff semi-final, Plymouth at home in the playoff semi-final, and then the playoff final at Wembley, and then the Aston Villa FA Cup game. Morgan McGee says, who could forget Jordan's debut goal for Wycombe? His first goal for Wycombe, certainly, at Adams Park, where he got a yellow card for celebrating with his mum. Wikipedia says Ty Gooden moved in '93, which is either Hoddle or Gordon. Okay, to keep the peace, if you've got Ty Gooden as well, then you get a point for him too. If you put Keith Scott, Laurie Sanchez, and Ty Gooden, then you get an extra bonus point just for being extra clever. Question 9. This week, the Football Manager Cup kicked off with Wycombe drawn away at Crewe Alexandra. Craig Anderson is the manager, but what was the final score in the match? Wycombe won 2-1. They're in the second round draw, which I think we find out the answer to who Wycombe are playing in the next round on Monday. The game takes place next week, but the answer to question 9 is Wycombe won 2-1 at virtual Gresty Roads to progress to the second round of the Football Manager Cup. Well done, Craig, for winning your first game. Neil Higginbotham almost forgot that Alex Lynch played in the Villa game at home in the Cup. Will Schaefer picked 2-1 with a lucky guess. Well done. Question 10. Who was the last Wycombe manager to win their first competitive game in charge of the Wanderers? It was Tony Adams. An FA Cup win against Swindon Town. Tony Adams back in 2003. Tom Dell needs the answer to question 13. We haven't got there yet. Who was the last Wycombe manager to win their first competitive game in charge? It was Tony Adams for 1 point. Right, question 11. We're moving on to the 10 questions about this season. Wycombe were unbeaten in the league until their 8th game. Who did they lose to and what was the score? For 1 point, you need to have Gillingham and 2-0. Gillingham 2-0. If you've got that, you've got yourself 1 point. Tom needs the answer to question 3. Michael Simpson, Sean Devine, Andy Baird. 1 point for each, Tom. Question 11. Wycombe were unbeaten in the league until the 8th game. Who did they lose to and what was the score? Gillingham 2-0 for 1 point. You need Gillingham and 2-0 for 1 point. Indeed, it was, Neil. The weather was much better for that defeat than last season. Question 12. Wycombe lost in the first round of the League Cup in August. Who did they play and what was the score after 90 minutes? The opponents were Reading, and after 90 minutes, the score was 1-1. Wycombe lost on penalties. So the answer for 1 point, I need Reading and 1-1. Reading and 1-1. Question 30. In the much maligned EFL Trophy, Wycombe failed to progress out of the group stage. They played 3 games. Who were they against and what was the score? 1 point for each team and result. So I need Stevenage, 1-0 defeat. Fulham, under 21s. I will take Fulham, but Fulham under 21s to be ultra correct. Fulham under 21s lost 2-1. MK Dons won 2-1. So Wycombe lost to Stevenage 1-0 They lost to Fulham under 21s 2-1, and they beat MK Dons 2-1. They were the 3 EFL Trophy games this season. You get a point for each correct team and score. So 3 points available. So if you've just got Stevenage and not 1-0 or a different scoreline, no point. So you need Stevenage 1-0, Fulham 2-1, MK Dons 2-1 win. So 3 points available there. Question 14. This season, the club launched the Me and My Wycombe series, which shines a spotlight on Chairboys fans. It kicked off with Jake and Stanley Lavender, 2 young brothers who both had to describe or sum up Wycombe in 3 words each. Right, you get a point for each word correct. Jake, defying the odds. If you've got any of those words, you get 1 point for each word. So even if you've got the, you get 1 point. Defying the odds. And then determined, passionate, fighters was Stanley's 3 words. Determined, passionate, and fighters. A point each for one of those. So defying the odds, determined, passionate, fighters. If you've got all 6 of those words, 6 points. I think the Lavenders have got that one. Tricky question if you've not seen it, or if you saw it a while ago and don't remember, which perhaps is all of you. Impossible question. Well, I didn't say they were all easy. Some of them are easier than others. Don't worry, we got some questions that go deep into the past later on. No points for Super Smashing Great, although that may be mine if I was asked for 3 words. Question 15. If the season was decided by points per game, Wycombe would finish 3rd. Who would be the 2 promoted teams? And I need them in the right order. First would be Coventry. Second would be Rotherham. So I need first Coventry, second Rotherham, 2 points if you've got that. If you've got Rotherham second and a different team first, 1 point. But if you've got Coventry first, Rotherham second, you've got 2 points. Noel Ashford guessed the Lavender round and got it spot on. Cheers, Noel. Right, Coventry first, Rotherham second. That's the answer to question 15 for 2 points. Under the points per game method, this is question 16. Under the points per game method, who would be 4th, 5th and 6th in League One? 4th would be Oxford, 5th would be Portsmouth and 6th would be Fleetwood Town. So 4th Oxford, 5th Portsmouth, 6th Fleetwood for 3 points. Amazingly, they've all got the same points per game total, 1.71. All 3 of those teams with the same points per game total. So it's gone down to goal difference. So Oxford with plus 24, Portsmouth with plus 17, and Fleetwood with plus 30. If it goes to points per game and they make us go through a traditional playoff campaign, Wycombe would play Fleetwood in the semi-final. Not saying that is going to happen, but it might. You never know. Tom Hancock, am I drinking Dettol? No, not quite yet. I'm moving on to some Cynic Bang later, perhaps. Question 70. Which player has the best shots on target percentage this season? Jason McCarthy with 100% of his shots on target. 100% Jason McCarthy. 3 shots, all 3 on target. Trick question, really, because I'm guessing a lot of you might have gone for strikers, but actually, I did say in the question the percentage of shots on target and not who's had the most shots. Chris Waldron says, imagine a playoff final against Oxford. Wow, what a game that would be. Question 17, the answer is Jason McCarthy. He has the best shots on target percentage for Wycombe this season for 1 point. Which player has the most assists this season for Wycombe Wanderers? It's Adebayo Akinfenwa with 5 assists. If you've got Akinfenwa or Bayo, then you've got 1 point. Billy the Swan went for JJ on shots. Nope. Neil Higginbottom says, does that include his crosses on target? Well, as I say, the stats came from BBC Sport. They weren't that detailed, but we'll take it they might do. Tracy White's daughter, Emily, got McCarthy. Congratulations, Emily. Well done. Right, question 19. In August, Wycombe beat Southend 4-3 at Adams Park. But how did the scoring sequence go? I started you off by saying that Southend went 1-0 up. They then went 2-0 up. So we need Southend 2-0. Then Wycombe to make it 2-1. Then Southend to make it 3-1. Then Wycombe 3-2. Wycombe 3-3. And Wycombe 4-3. So if you've got Southend, Wycombe, Southend, Wycombe, Wycombe, you get 1 point. Wow, I need a drink after that. So, question 19. In August, Wycombe beat Southend 4-3. How did the scoring sequence go? It went Southend, Wycombe, Southend, Wycombe. Thank you, Ed. You've put it up there now for everyone to see. If you've got that, then you've got yourself a point. Question 20. What was the Wycombe starting lineup when they beat MK Dons at Stadium MK in the EFL Trophy? You get 1 point for 7 correct players or more, 2 points for the 11, and a bonus point if you guess the captain as well. In goal, Cameron Yates. Right back, Jacob Gardner-Smith. Centre back and captain, Cedo John-Barty. Giles Phillips, centre back. Jamie Maskell, left back. A midfield three of Namdi Offerbor, Nick Freeman and Alex Patterson, with Josh Parker up front and Paul Smith and Alex Samuel. So Yates, Gardner-Smith, John Barty, the captain, Giles Phillips, Jamie Maskell, Freeman, Offerbor, Patterson, Samuel, Parker, Smith. 7 players or more is 1 point. 2 points if you got the whole 11. And if you got the captain, then you get an extra point. Even if you just got one player and it was the captain, and you said it was the captain and it was Cedo John-Barty, you get 1 right. Unlucky, Aaron, you got 1 wrong. You put Kashket over Smith. Adam Cecil asked the answer to question 18. It's Adebayo Akinfenwa with the most assists this season for Wycombe Wanderers. Right, that takes us to the end of the first half. It's out of 36/37 with the Ty Gooden confusion. We'll call it 37. 22.5 points for Jim. Big Jim, well done. I think that's nearly what you got last week in total. Paul McLeod with 26. That's very good indeed. Yep, Cedo the Plant was captain. Not this Cedo. 24 points. Clifty, 24.5. Clifty he was the winner 2 weeks ago. Alan Cecil, 25. Very good. Louise Brown, in true maths teacher style, 46% increase on our first half score last time. It's the progress counts indeed. Gareth Brock, 26. Phil Smith, 22.5. Grab yourself a very quick drink. We'll kick off the second half in a couple of minutes. Let's just go through the scores. Amy Lavender, 23. Well done. Andy Rogers doing much better this week. Order restored in the Rogers household. Andy on 19.5 and Stato, his daughter, on 9. Could be a big second half to come, though. Amy Lavender, 23. Dan Carr, 15. Dale Herman on 24. Steve Dole, 19.5. Tom Dale, 33 from the Jolly Boys. Fantastic. Ed, 18 for the 7:30 racing team. Ben Mile, 14. Big second half needed for Ben. 19 for Leo Vickers. Neil Higginbottom is in the drop zone, he reckons, on 13 points. Noel Ashford Zoom Group got 26. Pretty good. Very good indeed. Tracy White, 19. Aaron White, 24. James Ray, 24.5. Christian Sturluson in Iceland on 23. Adam Cecil, 25. Tony Sutton has got a 100% increase on last time. Elaine Collins, 19.5. Billy the Swan, 13 points, but already beating last time's shocker. Morgan McGee, 21. Mike Ball, 19. Peter Lerner is not sane. Teresa Slavin. In fact, we're having a few queries on the MK Dons lineup. I'm going to look in my book. Let's have a look. A few people saying that Kashket started and Smith came off the bench. And I've got a sneaking suspicion he might be right. You are correct. Apologies. It's Kashket who started, not Paul Smith. So adjust your scores accordingly. I knew something would go wrong. Scott Kashket over Paul Smith. Paul Smith came on at half time and was excellent in the second half. I now remember it as if it was like yesterday. Wycombe's football manager Craig Anderson is on 16. Ryan Isaac has thanked me for the correction. He's now on 32 points. Noel Ashford says his team was mainly him getting the right answers. Sorry, James, you lost a point with my correction. Thanks for pointing that out, guys. That was my mistake. Right. If you can give us a thumbs up in the chat room, we'll kick off with the second half to get this done before we all have to go to work tomorrow. Right, are we ready, guys? Right, okay. The thumbs up are coming through. Let's kick off the second half. Right, is the Watford fan still in? Because he might like this question. Former chairboy Ikechi Anya went on to become a full international after leaving Wycombe Wanderers, but he qualified for 4 countries. I want to know what countries he qualified for. And which country did he represent? 1 point for each correct country. All Schaefer Peak has just finished his half-time orange. Ikechi Anya became a full international, but he could have played for 4 countries. He played for one of them. I want to know the 4 countries, including the one he played for, that he qualified for. Incredible question, this, and this is courtesy of Christian Sturluson, our friend in Iceland, who provided this question for this quiz. How many, 4 countries Ikechi Anya could represent internationally. What were they? He represented one of them. I can't think of any other footballer that can say that they can qualify for this many countries. But Ikechi Anya qualified for 4 countries to play internationally. What were they, including the one that he actually represented? Question 22. In late February 2012, Wycombe were fighting relegation from League One. Manager Gary Waddock signed 4 players on loan who all made their debuts against Hartlepool United at Adams Park. Paul Hayes was one of those 4 loan signings. Who were the other 3 who played in that game against Hartlepool? You get 1 point for each. So in February 2012, Wycombe, in trouble at the bottom of League One, the manager Gary Waddock signed 4 players on loan who all made their debuts against Hartlepool United at Adams Park. Paul Hayes was one of them, but who were the other 3 loan debutants for that game at home against Hartlepool United? Paul Hayes, what a loan spell. And came back a few years later, of course. So the 3 other players, other than Paul Hayes, who signed on loan and made their debut against Hartlepool United at Adams Park, February 2012. Question 23. What was the score in that game against Hartlepool United? Wycombe took them on at Adams Park. 4 debutants, all signed on loan. Paul Hayes was one of them. The previous question, you're going to tell me who the other 3 were. I now want to know the score in that game. Jack, delete your comment. 23. What was the score in that game against Hartlepool back then? I remember it really well because I just remember thinking those poor Hartlepool fans. Wycombe were on really bad form. Then Wycombe signed 4 players on loan. But what was the score at Adams Park? Cheers, Jack. You deleted the answer. You put it up before I asked the question, in fairness to you. Now, question 24. What Michael Jackson song did Gary Waddock use as his team talk before that game against Hartlepool? I interviewed Paul Hayes this week for Ringing the Blues podcast, which will be out hopefully in the next few days. He told me a great story about his debut for Wycombe Wanderers, and the team talk was Gary Waddock playing a Michael Jackson song to the team. That was it. No team talk. He just played a Michael Jackson song before they went out. But what Michael Jackson song was it that Gary Waddock played to that team that played Hartlepool at Adams Park? Chris Waldron says, one of those loanees, I can't remember his name, but I can remember exactly what he looks like. Do I get a point? If you can send me a drawing on Twitter, then perhaps we'll see. At Blunt Phil on Twitter. I've not had a chance to look at the Twitter messages this evening. Probably just a lot of abuse about the fact that YouTube wasn't working at the start. Right. What Michael Jackson song did Gary Waddock use as his team talk before the game against Hartlepool back in February 2012? Paul Hayes gave me the intel on that one, so it must be true. Question 25. Which Wycombe player has the squad number 15 for this season? Which Wycombe player has the squad number 15 for this season? Interestingly, looking at the squad list for this season, Wycombe don't have a number 6 or a number 9. Question 25. Which Wycombe player has the squad number 15? Who has the squad number 15 this season? Question 25 once more. Which Wycombe player has the squad number 15? Tom Hancock correctly says that El Abd and Craig McHale-Smith were 6 and 9. I think you're right. Certainly with El Abd, and I think possibly with Craig McHale-Smith as well, which would explain it. Although we have signed other players on loan since then who could have taken those shirts perhaps. Question 26. Speaking of loans, this question is about loans. Wycombe have 5 loanees in the squad currently. Who are they? And I also need to know their parent clubs. Just 1 point for all of this. No mistakes. This is a tough question. You have to get them all right. I need the name of the player and the name of the parent club. All of it needs to be correct. There's 5 loanees. I need all of their names and their parent clubs. Any mistake, no point. There's just 1 point on offer for this question. Question 26, loans. Wycombe have 5 loanees in the squad. Who are they? And I also need their parent clubs. For just 1 point, no mistakes. A lot of them have played a big part this season. Wycombe used the low market very well indeed, of course. So just to recap, question 26. 5 loanees in the squad at Wycombe at present. Who are they and who are their parent clubs? I need all 5 names and their parent clubs. No mistakes, all for 1 point. Question 27. Still on loans, Wycombe had 2 players out on loan when the season was suspended. Who are they and what clubs were they at? For 1 point. 2 players were out on loan when the season was suspended. What are their names and what clubs were they at? 2 players out on loan from Wycombe. I think we might have given one of those away in the chat on the last question or the squad number question. So if you're paying attention, right, question 28. Who is the missing name from this list? Jim Kelman, Martin O'Neill, Alan Smith, John Gregory, Laurie Sanchez, Tony Adams, John Gorman, Paul Lambert, Peter Taylor, Gary Waddock, and Gareth Ainsworth. There is a name missing from that list. For 1 point, I need to know that name. Jim Kelman, Martin O'Neill, Alan Smith, John Gregory, Laurie Sanchez, Tony Adams, John Gorman, Paul Lambert, Peter Taylor, Gary Waddock, and Gareth Ainsworth. There is a name missing from that list. Who is it for 1 point? Jim Kelman, Martin O'Neill, Alan Smith, John Gregory, Laurie Sanchez, Tony Adams, John Gorman, Paul Lambert, Peter Taylor, Gary Waddock, and Gareth Ainsworth. There is a name missing from that list. Who is it for 1 point? Similar question on the first lockdown quiz. We listed all of the kit manufacturers in order from, I think, the late 80s onwards, with one missing. And a lot of you said that really drove you mad. That question may do the same. Who knows? On to question 29. On the 19th of November 2019, England under-20s played Iceland under-20s at Adams Park. What was the score? On the 19th of November 2019, so last November, England under-20s played against Iceland under-20s at Adams Park. What was the score? Some of you may have been there. Can you remember what the score was? Just the mere mention of England-Iceland may send some of you into a cold sweat. But it was the under-20s, England under-20s against Iceland under-20s at Adams Park. What was the score? Tony Sutton was there. Can he remember what the score was? Question 29. England under-20s played Iceland under-20s at Adams Park last November. What was the score? Tony can't remember what the score was. Morgan McGee wants to know question 27. Which 2 Wycombe players were out on loan when the season was suspended this season? What are their names and what clubs were or are they at? That was question 27, a recap for Morgan McGee there. Question 30, back to this England under-20 games. Which former Wycombe youth team player scored for England under-20s in that game against Iceland? So question 29, England under-20s played Iceland under-20s at Adams Park last November. What was the score? Question 30, which former Wycombe youth team player scored for England in that game? For 1 point. Louise Brown was at the England-Iceland game as well, and they can't remember either. Must have been a great game. But it was a game where a former Wycombe youth team player scored for England. What's his name? That's the answer to, that's the question 30. Question 31. When Gaz first took over as manager, he started doing pub quizzes on the team bus for long away days. Good idea. One long away trip, Junior Marias and Courtney Hawes were on the same quiz team. But how did they answer the following question? What is the biggest carnivore in the UK? What did Junior Marias and Courtney Hawes put for their question? What is the biggest carnivore in the UK? What did Junior Marias and Courtney Hawes answer that question with on one of Gaz's away day bus quizzes? I remember doing a piece on 3 counties with Gaz with these pub quizzes. He said to engage the players mentally on the way to these long away games, so they weren't all sat there looking at their phones on the team bus. One of the questions of those quizzes was, what is the biggest carnivore in the UK? But what was the answer provided by Junior Marias and Courtney Hawes? I don't want to know the correct answer to the question of Gaz's quiz. I want to know what Junior Marias and Courtney Hawes came up with as an answer to what is the biggest carnivore in the UK. A few of you are fading in this second half. Question 32. In January 1975, some of you may remember this, Wycombe drew with First Division Middlesbrough 0-0 at Lokes Park in the FA Cup third round. For 1 point, who was the Middlesbrough manager on that day? In January 1975, Wycombe drew with First Division Middlesbrough 0-0 at Lokes Park in the FA Cup third round. Who was the Middlesbrough manager that day? Chris Waldron said it's Aston Villa in the League Cup all over again. Yeah. 3 up. Was it 3-1 up or 3-0 at half time? I think it was 3-1 up at half time and lost 8-3, didn't we? Yeah. That was a long time ago now. Anyway, question 32. January 1975, Wycombe 0, Middlesbrough 0, FA Cup third round at Lokes Park. Who was the Middlesbrough manager that night? That day, sorry. Question 33, still on that game. January 1975, Wycombe Middlesbrough at Lokes Park. To the nearest 1,000, what was the attendance? To the nearest 1,000, what was the attendance at Lokes Park for Wycombe Middlesbrough in the FA Cup third round in January 1975? Steve Dole was there. Did he count the attendance? Clifty reckons his title defence is going to be as good as a defence as when we partnered Michael Dewberry and Luke Oliver. Was it that bad today, Clifty? Dale Herman is getting excited about attendance questions. There's a man who pays attention to the facts and the numbers. To the nearest 1,000, what was the attendance of Wycombe Middlesbrough in the FA Cup at Lokes Park in January 1975? To the nearest 1,000. So have a guess, basically. If you haven't got an idea, you might be right. You never know. Still on this game, Wycombe Middlesbrough, FA Cup. Question 34. Which current Sky pundit played for Middlesbrough that day? Which current Sky pundit played for Middlesbrough that day? Wycombe versus Middlesbrough, 0-0 draw at Lokes Park, FA Cup third round, January 1975. Which current Sky pundit played for Middlesbrough that day? Steve Dole remembers that he couldn't change ends at half-time, which you could normally do at Lokes Park for league games. I remember that well. Teresa Slevin was there, but can't remember anything else about the game. So let's recap 32, 33 and 34. Who was the Middlesbrough manager that day? To the nearest 1,000, what was the attendance at Lokes Park? And then question 34, which Sky pundit played for Middlesbrough that day? Right, a bit of culture now. We move on to literature. In the modern classic Small Town Dreams by J.F. Cumming, it tells the true story of Wycombe's run to the FA Cup semi-final. In the book, the author is travelling around the world during this historic season, but what was the last game of the classic FA Cup run he managed to attend before going off on his world travels? So in the book, Small Town Dreams by J.F. Cumming, a true story, it tells us tale of Wycombe's run to the FA Cup semi-final. He missed a lot of that run, but what was the last game of that FA Cup run that he was able to attend before going off on his world travels? If you've not read this book, I can heartily recommend it, especially in these lockdown times, because frankly, what else is there to do? You probably could have done the first chapter or two as I tried to find a decent internet connection. So, in Small Town Dreams, J.F. Cumming, the author, a true story, he was travelling around the world when Wycombe were on their FA Cup run to the semi-final, but he did see part of that run. But what was the last game he saw in that run? Chris Waldron says it's a great book, and you are correct on that point, Chris, but no points for that point, if you understand. Question 36. Adebayo Akinfenwa, as we can all tell you, he was only signed to sell shirts and boost social media presence of Wycombe Wanderers. To the nearest 100,000, how many followers does Bayo have on Instagram? So I need it to the nearest 100,000. He has a lot of people following him online, Adebayo Akinfenwa. And of course, we're joking. I think he has sold a few shirts and boosted our presence, but he's also our record goal scorer. One of the best signings, if not the best signing in the club's history. But how many followers does he have on Instagram? To the nearest 100,000. Will Schaefer Peak is regretting not reading the book in preparation for this quiz. Dave Peaty has had it for ages but not read it yet. Well, Dave, there's no time like the present, really. Crack on with it tomorrow, maybe. So, Bayo Akinfenwa, to the nearest 100,000, how many followers does he have on Instagram? It's a lot, by the way. Right, Louise Brown, are you paying attention? We have the maths question now. So, you might need to jot these down. I need for your workings for this equation. I need take the number of points that Wycombe were clear at the top of League One on Christmas Day. Then to that number, you need to add the squad number of Fred Onyedinma. And then you need to subtract, so take away the shirt number of Curtis Thompson. And then you divide by the amount of mangoes that Darius Charles normally eats per day. So the number of points that Wycombe were clear at the top of League One on Christmas Day, plus the squad number of Fred Onyedinma, minus the shirt number of Curtis Thompson, divided by the amount of mangoes that Darius Charles eats every day, or most days. There's always a maths question. The number of points that Wycombe were clear at the top of League One on Christmas Day, plus the squad number of Fred Onyedinma, minus the shirt number of Curtis Thompson, divided by the amount of mangoes Darius Charles usually eats in a day. What number is left? What's the answer? It's been described as an outrageous question by Dale Herman. Tony Sutton says it's brilliant. I'll take the midpoint between brilliant and outrageous. Tom Hancock has said that question has ruined his evening. Sorry. Just so to recap, because it is a complicated one. So I need the number of points that Wycombe were clear at the top of League One on Christmas Day, plus the squad number of Fred Onyedinma, minus the shirt number of Curtis Thompson, divided by the amount of mangoes Darius Charles eats on an average day. What number are you left with? The mango story broke at the start of this season. It made it into the national press. One of my finer moments of journalism. Also made it onto the BBC website. I mean, come on, guys. Jeremy Spalander's brain hurts. I'm sorry about that. Question 38. How old is Anthony Stewart? And for an extra point, what is his middle name? It's been at Wycombe a long time. We should know these answers. How old is Anthony Stewart? And what is his middle name? Came through the youth system at Wycombe when we still had one. But how old is Anthony Stewart? And what is his middle name? The middle name you may have to guess, but that could be fun. You get a point for each. Point for the age, point for the middle name. Question 38. How old is Anthony Stewart? And what is his middle name? 1 point for each. Right, nearly there, guys. Question 39. The Couhigs took a majority stake in Wycombe Wanderers this season, but what is the name of their company in the UK? So what is the name of their collective that has the majority stake in Wycombe Wanderers now? It happened this season. Dave Bassett has put himself on the transfer list as a free transfer. It's been a tough second half, hasn't it? So the Couhigs have taken a majority stake in Wycombe, but what is the name of their company in the UK? Right, we've made it to the end. Wow. Question 40. What was the starting lineup of Wycombe's team that beat Preston North End at Wembley in the 1994 playoff final? 1 point for 4 players, 2 points for 7 and over, and 3 points for the starting 11. What was the starting lineup of Wycombe's team that beat Preston North End at Wembley in the 1994 playoff final at Wembley? You get 1 point for 4 players and over, 2 points for 7 players and over, and 3 points if you get all 11. I was there. Many of you were there as well, I know. Some of you, again, may not have been born then. But this is integral history. So if you don't know the answer, it's a good history lesson. It was a fantastic day. We all know what the score was. What was the starting lineup of Wycombe's team that beat Preston North End at Wembley in the 94 playoff final? 1 point for 4 players, 2 points for 7 plus, 3 points for all 11. And that is the last question of the quiz. We made it. Take 3 of the live YouTube shenanigans. I'm getting the impression that the second half was slightly trickier than the first, although the first half did have 10 questions based on this season, so that may explain it. Right. The second half is out of 28. So the final 20 questions are out of 28. Does anybody need a recap on a question? If not, we shall go through the answers. Give me a thumbs up in the comments and we'll get going. $26 for Big Jim. Need to recap on 26. That's the loan player question. Wycombe have had 5 loanees in the squad. Who are they? And I also need their parent clubs. And that's just for 1 point. Right, lots of thumbs up coming in. So I think we're okay then. Let's go through the answers. Second half, question 21. Former chairboy Ketchi Anya went on to become a full international after leaving Wycombe. He qualified for 4 countries. What countries were they, including the one he ended up representing? The answer, he played for Scotland because he was born there. He also qualified for England because he grew up there and played there for more than 5 years. He qualified for Nigeria through his father's side of the family. And he qualified for Romania through his mother's side of the family. So the answer, a point for each: Scotland, England, Nigeria, and Romania. Tom Dell needs a recap on question 30. Which former Wycombe youth team player scored for England under-20s against Iceland at Adams Park in November? That's for Tom Dell. That was a recap of question 30. Right, answer to question 21. Scotland, England, Nigeria, Romania, 1 point for each. Question 22. In late February 2012, Wycombe were fighting relegation from League One. Manager Gary Waddock signed 4 players on loan who all made their debuts against Hartlepool United. Paul Hayes was one, but who were the other 3 debutants? Now you get 1 point for each of these names. Craig Eastman, Gary Doherty, and Chris Hackett. 4 loanees started that game. Paul Hayes, Craig Eastman, Gary Doherty, and Chris Hackett. Dave Peaty has just asked for a couple of minutes. He's obviously gone to get himself a stiff drink or maybe a cup of tea. Seeing some nice pictures of you all on Twitter in your Wycombe regalia. Thanks for sending those. So the answer, to recap then, question 22, a point for each. Craig Eastman, Gary Doherty, and Chris Hackett. Craig Eastman we signed on loan from Arsenal. Gary Doherty on loan from Charlton alongside Paul Hayes, and Chris Hackett, so I think we signed on loan from Millwall. The Ginger Pele, as Billy the Swan points out, of course. And both Gary Dock and Paul Hayes ended up signing full-time for Wycombe at some point. Right, a point each if you got one for those 3 names. Well done if you got those. What was the score in that game against Hartlepool? It was Wycombe 5, Hartlepool 0. Paul Hayes with 2, Gary Doherty as well with a goal, and Stuart Bevan with the other 2. So Wycombe 5, Hartlepool 0. That's for 1 point. Question 23. Wycombe 5, Hartlepool 0. Dave's back in the room. Dave, question 21. Scotland, Nigeria, England and Romania. Question 22. Craig Eastman, Gary Doherty and Chris Hackett. Answer to question 23. Wycombe 5, Hartlepool 0. Right, question 24. What Michael Jackson song did Gary Waddock use as his team talk before the game? It was Man in the Mirror. Now, Paul Hayes, I interviewed this week for Ringing the Blues. The interview should be out, the pod should be out in a few days. Apparently, before the game, Gary Waddock walked in with a long mirror. He put it up in the dressing room, told the players to look in the mirror and listen to the song. He hit play, left the dressing room, came back in at the end of the song and said, remember these lyrics, go out there and do your stuff. Wycombe won 5-0. They also got relegated that season. So, yeah, man in the mirror for 1 point. Question 24. Wow, a lot of you got that right, it seems. So I thought that was a new story for me that Paul Hayes told me. Maybe it's club folklore. Question 25. Which Wycombe player has the squad number 15? Jamie Maskell, the young left-back. Clifty says Gary Waddock should have played it every week. Well, indeed he should. Question 25. Which Wycombe player has a squad number 15? It's Jamie Maskell. Chris Waldron says, was he playing bad before all the other games that season? Beat It was the guess by Christian Sturluson. I can see the logic in that answer, Christian, but unfortunately it's incorrect. So Jamie Maskell was the answer to question 25. He's squad number 15 for 1 point. Right, question 26. Wycombe have 5 loanees in the squad this season. Who are they? And I also need their parent clubs. Now, there's no mistakes here. So if you've got Giles Phillips, QPR, Paul Smith, QPR, Namdi Offerbor, Bournemouth, Jason McCarthy, Millwall, and David Stockdale, Birmingham City, then you've got 1 point. They can be in a different order, but I need the name and the parent club of all 5 loanees. And for that, you just get 1 point, I'm afraid. Giles Phillips, QPR, Paul Smith, QPR, Namdi Offerbor, Bournemouth, Jason McCarthy, Millwall, and David Stockdale, Birmingham City. Right, 27. 2 Wycombe players were out on loan when the season was suspended. Who were they and what clubs were they at? For 1 point, Craig McHale-Smith, Stevenage, Jacob Gardner-Smith at Braintree. If you've got that, you've got 1 point. Jeremy and Will Schaefer-Peak saying worth more than 1 point. I had to work very hard for that point. Well, that's football. Sometimes you have to work hard for just 1 point. Could be a big point, though, at the end of the quiz. For 1 point, question 27, who were the Wycombe players out on loan when the season was suspended and where were they? Craig McHale-Smith at Stevenage, Jacob Gardner-Smith at Braintree. Question 28. Who is the missing name from this list? Jim Kelman, Martin O'Neill, Alan Smith, John Gregory, Laurie Sanchez, Tony Adams, John Gorman, Paul Lambert, Peter Taylor, Gary Waddock and Gareth Ainsworth. The observant amongst you would have realised that's a list of Wycombe Wanderers managers since the late 80s, but there's one missing. If you've got Neil Smiley, you've got 1 point. He wasn't the manager very long, but he was the manager. Question 28, the answer is Neil Smiley for 1 point. Right, question 29. On the 19th of November 2019, England under-20s played Iceland under-20s at Adams Park. What was the score? A few of you were there. You've already told me that on the chat room, but you couldn't remember the score. Well, I can tell you for 1 point, it was England 3, Iceland 0. England under-20s 3, Iceland under-20s 0. If you've got 3-0 for question 29, you've got yourself a point. Yeah, a few of you got that one right. Well done, Teresa. Well done, Tracy, as well, for getting Neil Smiley. Question 30. Which former Wycombe youth team player scored for England? Danny Loader. He left in 2012 when the academy shut down. He's now played for Reading. In fact, played for Reading against Wycombe in the League Cup earlier this season. I think he scored the winning penalty in the penalty shootout. So which former Wycombe youth team player scored for England? Danny Loader. Noel Ashford went for Alan Gain in the manager's question. It was Neil Smiley. That's the answer we were looking for. So Danny Loader is the answer to question 30. Right, question 31. When Gaz first took over as manager, he started doing pub quizzes on the team bus on long away days. One of those games, Junior Marais and Courtney Hawes were on the same quiz team on the bus. But how did they answer this question? What is the biggest carnivore in the UK? Junior and Courtney thought the biggest carnivore was Notting Hill. That's the answer we're looking for here. The answer to 31 is Notting Hill. And I think the answer to the question, what is the biggest carnivore in the UK? I think it's a fox. But Junior and Courtney thought it was Notting Hill. There we go. If you've got Notting Hill for answer to question 31, you have 1 point. Courtney Hawes currently at Aston Villa in the Premier League. I think Junior's up in Scotland somewhere. Apparently it's a badger. Either way, I wasn't after the right question to the largest carnivore in the UK. I wanted to know what Junior and Courtney Hawes thought. Lots of you got that. Well done for getting into the mindset of Junior Marais and Courtney Hawes. Question 32. In January 1975, Wycombe drew 0-0 with Middlesbrough at Lokes Park in the third round of the FA Cup. Who was the Middlesbrough manager for 1 point? Jack Charlton. England World Cup winner in 1966, Jack Charlton, manager of Middlesbrough, away at Wycombe in January 1975. Jack Charlton for 1 point. Apparently he turned up and couldn't believe the slope. Question 33. Same game, Wycombe Middlesbrough, FA Cup 1975. To the nearest 1,000, what was the attendance at Lokes Park? The actual attendance, the declared attendance, was 12,200. So if you've got 12,000, that's the correct answer. 12,000 crammed into Lokes Park, which I think Steve Dole commented earlier that you can change ends at half time. That'll probably be why. I can't really, I remember going to Lokes Park. I can't imagine there being 12,000 people in it. It's bigger than the capacity of Adams Park. Stuart Redding says, surely the human beings are the largest carnivore in the UK. Well, that question isn't for debate. We wanted to know what Junior and Courtney wanted, but this one may range on into the weekend. So answer to question 33 is 12,000. 12,200 was the attendance at Lokes Park for that Middlesbrough game, but I asked for the nearest 1,000. 12,000 is the correct answer. Chris met Jack Charlton in 1999, and apparently he was still talking about this. Graham Souness played for Middlesbrough against Wycombe Wanderers at Lokes Park in January 1975. And now, of course, a Sky pundit. Massive fan of Paul Pogba. Noel Ashford points out that humans are omnivores. There you go. We're learning a lot this evening. So answer to question 34 is Graham Souness for 1 point. Question 35, the literature question. In Small Town Dreams, J.F. Cumming told the story of his travels around the world during Wycombe's FA Cup run to the semi-final. But what was the last game of that classic FA Cup game that he was able to attend before jetting off on his world travels? It was Grimsby Town at Adams Park, the draw. So Wycombe drew with Grimsby Town in the FA Cup run. If you've got Grimsby Town at home, then you've got a point. Wycombe went on to win the replay 3-1. Ted Rogers scored in the replay. So answer to question 35 is Grimsby Town. It was at Adams Park, but if you just put Grimsby Town, I will take Grimsby Town. Answer to 34 was Graham Souness. If you're asking, Tom Hancock asking what the answer to 34 was, Graham Souness. Dave Peaty says his late father was at Lokes Park when almost 16,000 were in. during the 50s. Wow. Adam Cecil needs 34 as well because of connection issues. Graham Souness is the answer to 34, and Grimsby Town is the answer to 35. And it was Grimsby Town at home. Right. Question 36. Adebayo Akinfenwa, who was only signed to sell shirts and social media likes for Wycombe Wanderers, I wanted to know, to the nearest 100,000, how many followers does he have on Instagram? It's 1.1 million. If you've got 1.1 million, then that's the correct answer to 36. Question 36. How many followers on Instagram to the nearest 100,000 does Adebayo Akinfenwa have on Instagram? 1.1 million. Wycombe's record goal scorer has 1.1 million. Football League era goal scorer, of course. 1.1 million followers on Instagram. That's the correct answer to question 36. Right, the maths question. The number of points clear at the top of League One on Christmas Day, plus the squad number of Fred Onyedinma, minus the shirt number of Curtis Thompson, divided by the amount of mangoes Darius Charles eats on an average day. What number do you have? So this is question 37. So Wycombe was 7 points clear on Christmas Day. 23 is the squad number of Fred Onyedinma. So add those together to get 30. Take away the squad number of Curtis Thompson, which is 18. That leaves you with 12. Divided by 2 mangoes, which is what Darius eats on an average day, leaves you with the number 6. If you've got the number 6, that's the correct answer to question 37. I don't care how you got there, but the answer is 6. Question 38. Dave Bassett, 4 mangoes. No, 2. 2 mangoes. Question 38. How old is Anthony Stewart? And what is his middle name? 1 point for each. Anthony is 27 years old. 1 point. And his middle name is Kelvin. For 1 point. Regular listeners of Ringing the Blues will have known that Darius eats 2 mangoes a day. It seems the mangoes has thrown a lot of you. That was the answer. Anyway, that goes back to question 37. We're on question 38 now. How old is Anthony Stewart and what is his middle name? Anthony is 27 years old and his middle name is Kelvin. You get 1 point for each. Question 39. The Couhigs have a majority stake in Wycombe. They've got that this season. But what is the name of their company in the UK? It's Feliciana EFL Limited for 1 point. Feliciana EFL Limited for 1 point. If you've got Feliciana EFL, I'll let you have it. It's Feliciana EFL Limited for 1 point. Question 40. What was the starting lineup of Wycombe's team that beat Preston North End at Wembley in the 1994 playoff final? You get 1 point for 4 players or more, 2 points for 7 or more, and 3 points for all 11. Right. Paul Hyde in goal. Jason Cousins at right back. Matt Crossley and Glyn Creaser at centre back, with David Titterton at left back. A midfield 4 of David Carroll, Keith Ryan, Nicky Reid, and Steve Guppy. Steve Thompson and Simon Garner, or Steve Thompson just off Simon Garner up top. So we want Paul Hyde, Jason Cousins, Matt Crossley, Glyn Creaser, David Titterton, Dave Carroll, Keith Ryan, Nicky Reid, Steve Guppy, Steve Thompson, and Simon Garner. They were the starting 11 at Wembley in 1994. If you've got 4 players or more, you get 1 point. If you've got 7 or more, you get 2 points. If you've got all 11, you get 3 points. Second half of the quiz was out of 28. which gives us a total, I think. Let's double check. Let me just check what this is out of. 36 had 28. So we're looking for out of 64 this evening. Out of 64. Dave Bassett, all 11 correct for the last question. Well done. Paul McLeod and Sue McLeod as well. 48 out of 64. That's a very good score. Dave Bassett. Oh, sorry, that was his 11 for the last question. Will Schaefer Peak, 35.5. Ryan Isaac, 56. Fantastic. Alan Cecil, 37. Gareth Brock, 46. Emily White, 36. Very good. Justin Williams, 47. Fantastic. I think 56 is the leader at the moment. 45%. Oh, percentage answer. Very good. Richard Bignell says, Preston question is 1 point for 4 players or more, 2 points for 7 or more, 3 points for all 11. Phil Smith, 37.5. Very good. Elaine Collins, 38. Tracy White, 33. Aaron White, 42. James Wilson, 34.5. Adam Cecil with 40. James Ray with 35.5. Noel Ashford, excellent 44. Amy Lavender, 34. A better performance from the Lavenders this week. 42 for Gareth Brook it was. 32 out of 64 for Ed and his 7:30 racing team. Mike Ball, 36. Chris Waldron, 35.5. Clifty, 40.5. Last week's champion has been toppled, but it's still a good score. Neil Higginbottom with 23. Billy the Swan with 18 points. He's put himself on loan at Braintree. 24 from Craig Anderson. That's our manager and football manager, no less. Ben Mile, 27. Says a poor day at the office. Louise Brown has a 19% increase on last time's score. We'll have to dig deep and go again next week. Excellent. Christian Sturluson, 40 out of 64. Again, the highest score in Iceland. Congratulations on that, Christian. Dan Carr, 23. There's always next week. Well, perhaps. Jack Vicos, 46. Stuart Lund, 38. Steve Dole, 36.5. Dave Peaty, 43. These are good scores. Tom Dell, 51. I think that makes you second. Dave Bassett, 36. He had internet issues. No, didn't we all? Me included. Wow. Dale Herman, 48 out of 64. Still a good score, Dale. 48 from Jonathan, 27 from Jeremy, the Harrow team. Peter Lerner, a poor score, but a great quiz. Cheers, Peter. And thank you, Teresa, as well. Glad you enjoyed it. Jenny Priest, thanks for the... Yeah, cheers, Jenny. Thanks for taking part. Well worth the wait, says Big Jim. Again, I can only apologise for the internet problems. Internet's under quite a lot of strain at the moment with everyone doing stuff at home and online. And me included, it seems. Anyway, I'm glad you all found me and we got through it in the end. It wouldn't be Wycombe without a late kickoff, let's be honest. Let's do this again, maybe. Maybe in a couple of weeks once more. We'll probably still be, hopefully, coming out of lockdown. We don't know. But I'll put up the next one we do again. I'll stick it up online and let you know what it will be. It depends on my work as well. But we'll work it out. We'll do another one if you want me to. Let me know online if you want. This will go up on YouTube now, so you can play along again if you want. If you want to relive the sorry experience. Cheers, Dale. He says, hats off for the attendance question and for my perseverance. Well, I think actually it's hats off for you guys for finding me 3 different times on YouTube because I kept disappearing. But yeah, we got there in the end. Right. Thanks, everybody, for all the messages. They're all flooding in now. Glad it filled up your evening. Yeah, right. Continue to take care of yourselves. Continue to stay safe. Keep an eye on all the Twitter feeds and everything of Wycombe Wanderers and me and everyone else because you never know. We might have some news at some point about what's going to happen this season. We may even have football again at some point. But the most important thing is take care, stay safe, wash your hands, etc. Have a good night. See you all soon. And come on, you Blues.